Welcome to the IT Free Training video on installing an Enterprise CA on Windows Server 2012 R2 for use with Active Directory Federation services. In this video, I will install an Enterprise CA and configure the Enterprise CA to start issuing certificates. In particular, I will configure a template on the Enterprise CA for use with Active Directory Federation services. Once the template has been created, certificate auto-enrollment can be used to issue a certificate to the Active Directory Federation server. In this case, I have used a simple CA setup. This does not have any redundancy and is not as secure as it could be. This video is only designed to get you going with the basics of Active Directory Federation services or set up a template on an existing Enterprise CA. If you are using a standalone CA, I will look at how to create a certificate using a standalone CA in the video looking at how to configure ADFS for high-cost training. If you are planning to use Active Directory Federation services on your network, you should consider learning more about certificates. With certificates, once you start using them, it is difficult to change later on if you decide to go in a different direction, so it is worth the time doing your research first. I will now change to my Windows Server 2012 R2 and look at how to install an Enterprise CA and configure it for Active Directory Federation services. First of all, I need to install the Certificate Authority role, so I will open Server Manager and select the option Add Roles and Features from the dashboard. Since I am installing the role on the local server, I will accept all the defaults in the install wizard until I get to the Select Server Roles screen. On this screen, I will select the role Active Directory Certificate Services. Once selected, I will be prompted to also add additional features for certificate management. Once I press Add Features, to add these, I will move to the Select Features screen. I do not require any additional features, so I will press Next. The next part of the wizard is the welcome screen for the certificate components install. Once I press Next, I need to select which components of certificate services that I require. Since I only want basic services, I will leave it on the default option of Certification Authority. This component is enough to use the auto-enrollment system in Active Directory to issue certificates to Active Directory Federation services. Once I press Next, I will be taken to the Install screen where I can press Install to start the installation. The install does take a minute or two to complete, so I've sped up the process. Once the install is complete, Certificate Services still needs to be configured. To do this, I need to select the exclamation at the top and then select the option Configure Active Directory Certificates Services on the destination server. This will launch the Certificates Services post-configuration wizard. On the welcome screen, it will ask what credentials you want to use to perform the install. I am logged in as a domain administrator, so I will leave this as is and move on to the next screen. On the next screen, I need to select which components I want to configure. This is easy because the only component that I installed was the Certification Authority component. Once I select this and move on to the next screen, I need to select if I want to install an Enterprise or a standalone CA. In this case, I will accept the default option of Enterprise CA. If this option is grayed out, make sure that the server is a member of the domain. On the next screen, I need to select if I want to install a subordinate or root CA. To make things simple, I will select a root CA. Personally, I would not use an Enterprise CA or a root CA, but to make things simple, I will use it in this case. In the certificate course, I discuss this in a lot more detail. On the next screen, I need to decide if I want to create a new private key or use an existing one. In this case, this is a new CA, and thus I don't have a previous private key that I can use, so I will accept the default option of Create a New Private Key and move on. On the next screens, I will accept all the defaults for cryptographic options, name of the CA, validity period, and database location. Now that all the settings have been set, all I need to do is press Configure to configure the CA. This process may take a minute or two, but I've sped it up for us. Once the wizard has completed, I can exit out of here and run Certificate Authority from the Tools menu. The CA has been installed, But now I need to configure a certificate template that will be used to create a certificate for Active Directory Federation services. To do this, I will expand down until I get to Certificate Templates. This will show all the currently configured certificate templates. To create a new template, I will right-click on Certificate Templates and select the option Manage. You will notice that there are more templates listed here than were on the previous screen. Before a template will appear on the previous screen and thus be available, it must be enabled. If you want to create a new template, it is best to find one that is similar, duplicate it, and then make changes to it. In this particular case, I will select the web server template, right-click it, and then select the option Duplicate Template. This will display the properties of the duplicated web server template. It is just a matter of making the required changes for Active Directory Federation services to this template. First, I will select the General tab and change the name of the template to ADFS SSL Certificate, since this is a certificate template for Active Directory Federation Services Secure Sockets Layer. Next, I will select the tab Subject Name. To make things simple, I will select the option Build from this Active Directory information rather than the default option which asks the administrator for this information. The certificate will automatically be created using Active Directory information. Next, I need to configure which information will be used. To do this, under Subject Name, select the option Common Name, and then tick DNS Name, and untick User Principal Name UPN. This essentially says, use the DNS name in the certificate, which will essentially be the fully qualified domain name of the server. If I select the Security tab, by default, the server will not have enough access to enroll, or, to put it another way, to automatically obtain a certificate. To add the server, I need to press Add, and then select the option Object Types, and make sure that Computers is ticked. Otherwise, when I perform a search for the computer name of the server, it will not appear in the results. Once this is selected, I can go back to the previous screen and enter in the computer name of the server that I will use to install Active Directory Federation services on in a later video. Once the computer name is entered, I need to also make sure Enroll is enabled so the server is able to obtain a certificate. That is all the settings configured. I can now exit out of here and go back to the Certificate Authority tool. Right-click Certificate Templates and select New Certificate Template to Issue. This will show all the certificate templates that are available, including the one that I just created. All I need to do is select it and press OK. You will notice now that the ADFS SSL certificate has been added to the list of certificates. That's it. The Enterprise CA has been set up and is ready to issue a certificate to be used for Active Directory Federation services. But that will be done in the next video. Thanks for watching this video from ITFreeTraining. I hope to see you in the next video where I install Active Directory Federation services. Until then, thanks and see you next time.